Welcome to today's demonstration. I will show you how to pattern a high-waisted skirt. But before we begin, I want you to have a good understanding of what a high-waisted skirt is. So the body has what is called the waist, and the waist is the smallest part between the upper body and the lower body. The smallest part of the waist is called the natural waist. And when we are patterning, any measurement added above that natural waist is considered a high-waisted skirt or pant or just garment. Any garment that is made with a subtraction below the natural waistline, that is considered a low waist. So with that said, I am going to begin. There are two methods that I would like to show you today. One method is using solely just the the skirt block, and the other method is a combination of the skirt block and the bodice. So the first thing that you would want to do is draw your center plumb line, and that's to make sure your center front is nice and straight. So that's your center front line. You will place your skirt pattern on top of it and make sure it's nice and straight, perfectly aligned. Mark a section of the waistline at the side seam, as well as the length of the skirt, whatever your choice may be. That is your discretion as a designer. The next thing you'd want to do is mark the ends of your dart, as well as mark the intake of the dart. So each dart must be sewn properly, otherwise the garment will not fit. The next thing you'd want to do is flip your pattern so it mirrors what you just traced. So I'm going to flip it. Two things you want to make sure you do. You want to make sure the center front, when flipped, also remains on that plumb line, while at the same time, the very tip of the waist level and your side seam touches the trace that you had done before. So I will go ahead and trace a section. You don't have to trace the entire thing because remember, this is our skirt and we're just building above the natural waistline. I will mark the ends of my dart as well and set your block aside. Once you have done that, in this case, for the purpose of demo, I would like to pencil in where the darts are so that you have an understanding of what happens when you subtract the parts you need. So those are the centers of my dart, just connecting each dart end. And now I'm going to, hopefully you can see this clearly. Now I'm going to just draw in the shapes of the darts. So previously, I had measured the intake of my dart. So I know that each dart that I have is a 1/2 inch wide. And so I'm making sure that my darts are evenly spaced from the center line. So that is what your full darts would look like. However, we do not need the full dart because we are only taking a section of the top to add to the skirt. So I will measure along the center front line 2.5 inches. Nice and square, so that point that touches the center front line must be 90 degrees. 90 degrees, okay? At the side seam, I will mark 1 inch. And that just creates a smooth, gradual transition from center front to side, and therefore giving it a more elegant finished look as opposed to just drawing a straight line across. So that is going to be the top of the waist, okay, the top of the skirt. Now at the side with this particular method, using only the skirt block and mirroring it, you want to make a subtraction at the side seam, a subtraction of 1/2 inch. I'm going to use my red so that you can see the difference. So 1/4 inch subtraction, and you want to bring that back down to the natural point of the waist, okay? So that kind of straightens it. Again, the reason is because the body from the waist down towards the hip is more curved, but from the waist up to the body is more, up to the bust level is more straight. And that's why there's that subtraction. So with that said, you will now add your seam allowances, and that would conclude this particular method. So the next thing I'm going to do is show you how the second method is going to look like. And it is my preferred method, mostly because technically speaking, the upper body and the lower body do not have the same shape and makeup, okay? So that would be your seam allowances. So everything above that seam allowance level is going to be discarded. Moving along, our next is to show you my preferred method. So just as we started before, I'm going to draw my straight plumb line. I'm going to use my front waist skirt. I'm going to trace a section of the front waistline. I'm going to trace a section of the side waist and the side seam to whatever the length of your skirt might be. I am going to mark the ends of my dart, as well as mark the intake of each dart. So that process doesn't change much from what we did before. Now, rather than flipping it as we did in this method, we'll be using the front bodice. So the front bodice requires a pivot transfer. So imagine you are transferring a dart to the shoulder or to the armhole or to the neckline, anywhere above that bodice, or even to the side bust seam, side bust. What you'd want to do is, again, make sure that you're placing the center front of your bodice along the same center front line for the skirt. You will hold your pattern in place with a push pin, an awl, a pencil, a pen, and you're going to pivot, which is rotate your block so that the side seam of your bodice touches the side seam of the skirt. So this point is very important. So once it touches in that same position, I will draw a section of that side seam. That's all I need, okay? I am also going to mark where my bust point ends. And the reason for that is so that you know the level at which your darts diminish. So using my ruler, I'm going to square a line from the center front just so that I can find that level. So that is my bust level. That's the bust level where the bust dart ends. Now, for the skirt, I have my initial drill hole from when I traced these. Okay, so these very points, I'm going to square that up to that bust level. So you want to make sure it's 90 degrees squared up on both darts. And then I'm going to draw in my dart just like I did on the previous method and connect those points back to the bust level. Whatever you do, you want to make sure your intake is accurate. Okay. So those are my darts. Now you can see the difference between the two. You've got a longer dart, which explains naturally you do have a longer distance between from the waistline to the bust level on the actual bodice, as opposed to this one where you've got it much shorter because all you're working with is just the darts of the skirt. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and again determine how high above the waistline, the natural waist level I want. And I will mark 1.5 just like I did before on the previous piece. And at the side seam, 1 inch. Now in this case, I'm going to blend just like I did before. Blend your points so that they meet, so it's just a nice, smooth, gradual curve. And in this case, I will not be making a subtraction at the side waist because I used the bodice block, okay? So with that said, the next thing I'm going to do is add my seam allowances. So I've got 1/4 at the top because we will make a facing. And 1/2 inch at the side seam. A 1/2 inch, okay? And of course you want to find your hem. Let's see, make sure you get the, so let's see. Let's just make it that short and then add a hem allowance. Okay. And so that is our skirt. Now, of course, all adjustments to how tapered the skirt looks like, that's entirely your discretion. But everything from the red line, that is going to be the new pattern piece to make a high-waisted skirt. So the next thing I'm going to do is cut it out and use that to make a facing pattern. Okay, this is now my working pattern.